Hi booktube, Aaron here. I hope you're well. Today I'm going to be talking a bit about Hamlet by William Shakespeare. So this month is Shaketember. We're all encouraged to read works by William Shakespeare. I'll have some more information about Shaketember down below if you're new to it. But there were some suggested plays. So the hosts, who all have wonderful channels, they had suggested 3 plays for you to read, and they were Antony and Cleopatra, Romeo and Juliet, and Richard III. And I already had my heart set on revisiting another play, and that's Hamlet. And so I read that instead, and I really loved it. And so I thought I'd just talk about what this experience was like, or I suppose more just my thoughts on Hamlet this time through. Some of the things that I've noticed in ways that, just things that came into focus a little more this time, and questions that have bubbled up to the surface. That there are going to be quite a lot of questions here. So this isn't going to be a definitive guide to Hamlet, but part of what I love about Hamlet is its ambiguity, and so I feel like trying to define Hamlet is doing it a bit of a disservice. I also watched an adaptation of Hamlet, so I'll talk a little bit about that, or at least I'll try my best to, and that was Kenneth Branagh's translation. Well, I suppose it is a kind of translation, his adaptation, and it's a full text adaptation, which is, I found, quite useful after having just read it. Again, it brought some of those things into keener focus for me. And there are roughly 3 things to talk about. I think they really split into 2 camps. So there's general plot and sort of political stuff, and then there's the ghost and the spiritual and religious, philosophical sort of stuff. So I'll do my best to make that divide as clear as possible. And I'll start off with everyone's favourite bit, and that's the politics and sort of general plot stuff. I think I will just start with something that jumped out at me about the end of the play, before I get nitty gritty into some of the politics. And that's just how unwitting Hamlet is right at the end. So I don't really feel like this is a play that you can spoil. But I think, as someone who's read it before, and I've seen a few adaptations, and so what happens in Hamlet is going to be very fresh in my mind. As you're getting up to that final duel at the end, you know exactly what's going to happen. And if it's your first time watching or reading it, you might not know. But I think for a lot of readers of Hamlet, you are going to know what's going to happen at the end, and you can't stop it. And yet Hamlet is totally, just totally, he doesn't have a clue. He's totally unwitting to this situation. And we have been clued off. We have already been told in a previous scene that there is a plot against him, and that this duel is a trap. And it was interesting, in the film, it felt like Kenneth Branagh wanted to fuel some of that energy, that idea that we know what's going to happen, and he's sort of bringing it more into the words and into the faces of the characters. I'm just going to do my best to try and find that last bit before he goes off. So that there's just a little famous bit. I suppose Hamlet's last words to Horatio before the duel: "Not a whit, we defy augury. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man knows aught of what he leaves, what is't to leave betimes, let be. And so there's that just openness and that sort of that peace in the face of possible death. And I think really for Hamlet and for Horatio, it is it's just potential death, potential danger, and yet for us we know that it could actually be much more than that. And for someone who's read it before, you know it's going to be much more than just a scrape. And Branagh, I feel like in the faces of Hamlet and Horatio, and in the way that he's delivering that, he's just getting you to feel that even more. So I really like that, and that was one of those passages actually from Hamlet that is one of the often quoted and very poignant moments of the play that really stood out to me this time through. Moving on to everyone's favourite part of Hamlet, which is the politics. I found this really fascinating. It got me questioning, like, who is actually the good guy in this play, or who are the good guys, who's on the right side in this play. And it's a bit that's, it's a whole element of the play that's often cut out because it's really long and the political stuff can seem a bit boring. But essentially, Fortinbras has been wronged by Hamlet's father, and there's a kind of squabble over territory and maybe even the crown, if I'm understanding it correctly. And so Fortinbras wants to right that wrong. And what's kind of brilliant about this whole political undertone in the play is that I think, one, it just adds a little more tension to a play that's all about indecision. So, a little more tension is always good. Even if it's not delivered particularly well, it might seem more of a distraction from the psychological drama. But I think it can work very well to add tension. It's also a mirroring of the main plot. So just like Hamlet's wanting to exact revenge on Claudius, Fortinbras is trying to right the wrongs of the past as well, and he is doing what he feels is right, and trying to fulfill what he feels is his destiny. And so again, I thought that was kind of brilliant, and something I hadn't noticed in quite the same way. And then this whole political thing, this coup that happens, it just adds a whole level of irony to the play as well. You get to the end of the play and everything that you've just been watching was kind of pointless. Particularly, I suppose maybe Hamlet still would have wanted to get revenge, but Claudius just kind of, just trying to grip on to power, doing everything he can to stay in control, and in the end, it's all for nothing. So it's another layer of tragedy on this layer cake of tragedy. But it's also really ironic and kind of funny as well that, that was sad, but it was kind of pointless, which it's at least my sense of humour. So I really actually liked that, and that the political undertones are something that I'll be paying much more attention to when I read and watch Hamlet again in the future. Moving on to the ghost then, and the spiritual element, the religious questions and things like that. So I think it's been noted before that this is a play that begins with who's there, and that question of who's there, who is this ghost, is one of the questions nagging in your head as the reader or watcher of this play, kind of all the way through, at least in the first half. It's also nagging in Hamlet and his friends' heads. After encountering the ghosts, can they really trust this ghost? Who is it? And so I'll just read a little bit out from Act 1, Scene 5. So this is when Hamlet is encountering the ghost. And the ghost says, "My hour is almost come, when to sulphurous and tormenting flames must render up myself." And then I'll just keep going. I'll cut out Hamlet's bit. He says, "Pity me not, but lend thy serious hearing to what I should unfold." Hamlet says, "Speak, I am bound to hear." And the ghost says, "So art thou to revenge when thou shalt hear." Which again is very, very fatalistic there, that he's bound to revenge. And then he claims that he's his father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast in fires, till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. And so the questions around this ghost's identity, so it could be that he's his father in some kind of purgatory, but interestingly it's not for his own sins that he's being held back from heaven, but for sins done against him, and they need to be made right. And so maybe it's more of a classic kind of folk tale, I suppose, that the folk tradition of a ghost who has unfinished business and can't rest. But there are questions. It could be that he's actually in hell, and that he's either a sinner or an evil spirit. He could be a devil. That's something that Hamlet asks. That's certainly a concern of his, that this devil is trying to tempt him. And I've been reading the Divine Comedy, so that's very much on my mind as well. And in a way, if he is a devil or something like that, he's like a twisted anti-Virgil for Hamlet, who he says that he's bound to enact this revenge after hearing what's happened. And later on he tells the story of how he died. And it's almost as if, and this is my weird little theory, that this ghost, this shade from the underworld, can kind of see what Hamlet's about to do. In Dante's Inferno, all of the shades can kind of see the future. We're told that they can see the future up until the Last Judgment, and once the Last Judgment is enacted, then they'll have no sense of time, they'll have no memories of the joys of their life, they'll just know torment. But now, since the Last Judgment hasn't happened yet, they can actually see the future. So maybe, we don't know that Shakespeare ever read Dante, but maybe, this devil or this sinner's soul can see the revenge that Hamlet is already going to enact out on Claudius, and he's just feeding him what he needs to hear to do it, because he's certainly got enough of a reason to hold a grudge against Claudius. He's kind of taken his father's place, married his mother. There's lots of weird Oedipal stuff later on in the play, and so maybe this is a twisted anti-Virgil guiding him towards sin rather than towards paradise. That's potentially one question, or one potential reading. But again, the ambiguity here is kind of what makes it. And again, something I noticed here, this is more of a side note, I really love this a little detail in here, which is the ghost saying how he died. He says, let's see, "Now Hamlet here it's given out that sleeping in my orchard a serpent stung me. And then he goes on to say that the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown. And so actually it was Claudius who poisoned him. But the idea of the serpent stinging him in the orchard initially made me think of Orpheus and Sir Orfeo, and the kind of Eurydice character. If I remember correctly, in Sir Orfeo, she's just stolen off by fairies into a kind of other world. But then in the classical version of the story, I believe she's poisoned or she's stung by a serpent. And so that idea of having to descend into the underworld of the dead and the living kind of mixing, that's certainly something going on there. And the veneration that a lot of the characters have towards Hamlet, it is kind of Orphic, like in the same way that Orpheus was kind of praised and people just found him so charismatic. But also there's that biblical element to it as well. You know, you have the serpent in a garden, and we have lies being told. And so again, just all of these classical just allusions in here, I think kind of muddy the water, but also kind of enrich this whole question of who the ghost is, who's telling the truth, what the purpose of this encounter really is. And so again, I've come to it with even more questions, but with even more to appreciate and even more to grapple with. And just all the religious questions in this play as well, I have less answers to them. And I think it's just because, having read it again, I'm finding more and more that Hamlet doesn't really have answers. It's very much, I think, a book or a story of its time. You can sort of feel the air of the period, that it's, you know, a culture that's been through, you know, a rise in humorism, humanism. It's been through a Reformation, a counter-Reformation, a counter-Reformation, and you know, so it's kind of, you know, fair for people not to know what to think, not to know what to believe, to have your convictions being sort of pulled in all kinds of different directions, to not know for sure what is right, and what, you know, what the right voice is to listen to, and that's exactly what's going on here with the ghost, with some of the theological questions that Hamlet is grappling with. It's just question after question after question, really. And I really, really love that, and I think that's what makes this play just so fascinating. The question of suicide is, again, one of those ones that comes up and is quite fascinating. I suppose that the kind of the theology of suicide and what happens to someone's soul after they die, I've always had a curiosity as to why, you know, why, you know, certain people sort of preached that, you know, doesn't matter what your life was like or what you believed, if you've killed yourself, you know, you're damned. There's, you know, underlined, no questions asked. I've always wondered how people got to that conclusion, and certainly Hamlet, you know, like everything else, there are no there are no answers to this question. He says, "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter." And so even then, you know, he's longing to die, but can't bring himself kill himself because of these teachings and these sort of tenets, sort of in the theology of the time, in the tradition. And the way that's kind of undone later on with Ophelia. So Ophelia does kill herself, and yet she's buried in a consecrated grave, and that's a question, or questions about that are brought up by the grave diggers, as they're digging her grave, and they being worldly and probably a bit more to the point are just saying that it's really because she's from a rich noble family that she gets to be put in the consecrated ground. If a common person killed themselves, then it'd be a totally different story. And so again, you have that ambiguity, but I do like the way Shakespeare kind of undoes it and gives a more sort of common, a more I suppose, what would be the way of putting it, just a more worldly, kind of sarcastic spin on it as well. And that's more or less where I'm going to leave it. I don't know what to think, and that's okay, because Hamlet is a play that I love because I don't know what to think about it, and everything is so unsettled. Again, I'll try to talk a bit about this adaptation. So I've already said how it just helped kind of crystallise sort of my thoughts and questions, and with it being a full text adaptation of the play, it meant that particularly those political elements that I was noticing on this read through were just highlighted even more, and particularly that question of who is actually the good guy in this play was kind of going through my head after having watched this adaptation. Just generally as a film, I think he does that Kenneth Branagh thing. He's not one to shy away from being over the top and the kind of theatrical, which is in a way kind of refreshing for Hamlet. It's not dour and depressing all the way through. It's quirky and weird, and when people are celebrating, they're really, really celebrating. It's sentimental, and kind of really lush as well. The colours are wonderful. The setting is wonderful. It's got a really, really great cast. It's got Derek Jacobi as Claudius, and he's famous for having played Hamlet. So I want to go into the special features of this, and I think there are some interviews in here, and it would be fascinating if they touch on what it would have been like for Derek Jacobi, having played both Hamlet and Claudius and having seen both sides. But overall, I really, really liked it. It's one of those films where it is really, really long, but it just sucks you in, and you're just happy living in that world as you're watching it. So it might not be an introduction for Hamlet, and there's certainly other more accessible, shorter adaptations of Hamlet. But if it's a play that you enjoy and you're intrigued by, then I would actually really recommend it. So there we go. There are my ambiguous and unsettled thoughts on Hamlet. This is, a reread among many, I'm sure. So I'll be coming back to this play. I hope a few more times before I shuffle off this mortal coil. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.